Hi, welcome to Office Hours. I'm Eden, and this is Krishna. We're Udacity coaches, and we're going to be talking to you today about actions and outlets. And Office Hours in general is a time when we talk about a certain iOS subject, and afterward we take your questions. But before we start, we have Miriam here who's going to talk to you a bit about the Nanodegree program in general and take any questions you have about that.
If you guys haven't seen me in your Nanodegree course yet, I'm Miriam. Like Eden said, I'm your Nanodegree community manager. So my role throughout the Nanodegree is basically going to be to make sure, along with these lovely people, that we make this as good an experience for you as possible. So yeah, just wanted to give you a brief overview, especially if you just enrolled, today or yesterday or very recently, of what a Nanodegree actually is. So it's basically a series of projects. So in this case, you're going to be building awesome iOS apps. And for each of those projects, to prepare you to work on them, we have courses to get you ready and make sure you're up to speed on all the content you need to know. So as you go through the Nanodegree, you'll be taking courses, working on projects, and our team, as well as your fellow students who are in your community, your cohort that you started with, will be here to support you. So you'll be seeing a lot more of these people in sessions like Office Hours and other ways to
the forums.
The forums, of course. Huge resource. You'll be interacting with us a lot, and hopefully interacting with your peers a lot too. So I would suggest at this point, since you guys are super early on in the program, if you haven't gone through orientation yet, definitely go through all the videos there and complete all the activities. Basically helps you get set up and get started so that you're going to be successful in the program. So and then once you're done with that, you can move on to working on the actual content of the Nanodegree. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions about the program in general?
Yes. Hi, I'm Surajit. I'm one of the Udacity coaches, and I'm off camera. The first question we have is, should we join Apple's iOS developer program? Does Udacity belong to Apple's iOS Developer University program? The question's from Tom Recht.
All right. I guess I'll take that. So you don't have to be part of the developer program to complete the Nanodegree. You're free to test all your apps on the simulator that comes with Xcode. Mm-hmm. However, if you want to test your apps on a device, if you want to get some experience with whatever it takes to submit your app to the App Store and put it on your device and all that stuff, then I suggest that you do sign up for a developer account.
But don't feel like you need to.
Yeah. As far as the second question, so I think the second part of your question was, are we part of the university program at Apple? I don't believe that we are, but we're working on possibly having a solution for that in the future. So yeah, we'll keep you posted.
Another question from Tom is there a printable list of lessons, courses, etc. that we should watch? And an approximate timeline.
Actually, Kristen already has your Nanodegree portal pulled up. This is something that as you go through orientation, you'll be introduced to the portal, but figure we might as well give you a preview of it now if you haven't checked it out yet. Your portal is really sort of the place it's kind of like your roadmap throughout the Nanodegree. So you can see over here on the right-hand side, there's your project deadlines are listed. So you do have a timeline you're working on as you go through the Nanodegree, and in this middle section, sorry, I'm just borrowing your computer.
Yep.
Hope that's okay.
No worries.
In the middle section, you'll see each of the projects you'll work on in order, and if you expand each of them, you can see the courses you're going to work on. So this is sort of similar to what Tom is asking for, just in terms of a list of everything you'll work on. But we're also going to be putting on the site, hopefully later this week, a printable sort of week-by-week timeline for you to go through to make sure you know what to work on each week and try to accomplish, so you stick to the timeline that your cohort's working on.
Cool.
Another question about the program is from David Palazzo. Can somebody with no tech job experience and no degree certificate in anything tech or coding related have a decent shot at being hired as an iOS developer after taking this Nanodegree?
Yeah.
So I would say that really depends on the. They said they had no programming experience to begin with. I would say yes. I would say yes. You can get a job as an iOS developer, but I would say that as a caveat to that, you'd actually want to start with some basic experience before starting this Nanodegree. Yeah. So we have a couple other courses that would be really good to take to introduce you to programming, and then after having done a couple of those, I definitely think that you can take the courses as part of this nano degree and get a job for sure.
Yeah, as long as you have the prereqs coming in, the
Yeah.
goal of the nano degree is to get you ready for
And get you there.
deployment as an iOS developer.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a question for you, Miriam.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to add subtitles to the videos? Not
Yes.
the YouTube-generated ones.
I actually,
Real ones.
I actually literally 2 seconds ago was talking to the head of our video team about this because I noticed that the orientation videos don't have subtitles in them yet. So yeah, those will be added soon. They should already be in the courses. We can double check on that as well. There is a process we have that you need to make sure is implemented for orientation. So yes, we can and will do that.
There's a question that I can answer.
Okay.
Let's share it.
All right.
How long after we submit projects do we get them back? I've been waiting almost a week, yet I've seen coaches on chat say it's usually within 24 hours. Both of those things happen to be true. At this point, we're a little behind since we weren't actually expecting an onslaught of submissions on day one. We were very pleased to find that we had over 50 submissions within the first week for the first project. Way to go.
Yeah.
Nice.
Good job, you guys.
I want to stress that this is not what we expected. It's still less than 10% of the enrolled population who has done this. So if you haven't started on that project yet, you are not behind.
Yes, don't worry.
If you have submitted it, you're really far ahead. We will get you the submissions graded within a week. If you've been waiting almost a week, I'm really sorry. You should have it in the next day or so.
Yeah.
True. Do we have any other questions?
Yes,
Come on.
here is one that says, one of the biggest issues I run into is that I know the concept and the hierarchy, but I don't know how to write down the syntax. What do I do to become familiar with syntax?
I would say that I think it just kind of comes with the territory of doing it more often.
Yeah.
The more you go through the course, the more you get used to the kind of syntax that Swift has, and I don't know if there's anything in particular that you can do before doing that to familiarize yourself with it. Maybe there's I would go through the Apple documentation and just read through it, at least the basics, which is like the first chapter, and that should orient you pretty well to get started. And then the rest of it, I think, just comes with time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also really normal. I know some people, not sure who the student in particular who's asking is, but some people who are newer to programming feel like they have to memorize all the syntax, and that's just not what you do in the real world. You know, as a real developer in the real world, you reference documentation all the time. So that's a normal practice to continue doing too.
Couple more questions. This one's from Robert Atkinson, who asks, in lesson 2, when we were asked to use the stop image button, the stop record button, I used vector images. My way of doing it was different from what the instructor showed. Do I need to do it the same way?
No, not necessarily. So as long as your project still meets the specifications in the rubric, which I believe it does, even if you use vector images, it's completely fine. So in this case, yeah, it's perfectly fine to use vector images.
And last couple of questions. One is from Andres, who asks, TDD or BDD development approach will be taken in the Nanodegree?
TDD.
So I assume TDD is test-driven development. I'm not really sure what BDD means.
Behavioral development.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay.
Let's do it both.
Would you like to take that?
I'm Gabrielle. I'm off camera.
But she'll be on camera soon. She'll
We
come
will
on soon.
hold that question until Gabrielle's on camera.
Let's do that.
The last question. There are often links to suggested courses, videos, references, etc. embedded in the items. Is it possible to have a list of all of those?
Yeah, we can go through and create one. It probably will take a little while for us to collect everything, but we'll definitely get started on that.
Cool. Do we have any other questions?
No, there is an answer to one of the previous questions from Marvin Turner.
Let's hear it.
This is to Tom's question about whether we needed to join the dev program. He says, Jason said that we don't need to join it in order to complete the Nanodegree. However, it's probably useful when you're on the job market to have stuff that's actually on the Apple Store.
For sure.
So
I would agree with that.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I can make room for Gabrielle if that would.
Okay, sure. So thank you so much, Miriam.
No problem. Bye, guys.
Chris and I are going to talk a little bit about actions and outlets, and then we'll have Gabrielle, one of the instructors of UIKit, to join us for a question and answer session. So just a little bit more about actions and outlets in general, because they can be a little bit confusing at first. So what's the difference between them, and when do you use which? And we're also going to talk about outlet collections as well. So outlets in general can be thought of as references from a UI element to the code in your assistant editor. So they're called properties in iOS. They're also variables, but essentially they're a way that you can manipulate that UI view from your code. Actions, on the other hand, are a representation of the interaction between the user and a UI element. So when that interaction happens, it triggers an action, which will always be a function. And within your code, you can choose what will happen within that action. So does every view need an outlet? Does every view need an action? No. So you'll have some elements that you don't necessarily need to refer to, and you'll have elements that you might not want any sort of reaction to happen when a user interacts with it. Can you have both? Yeah, there are times when you'll maybe want both. You'll have maybe a button that you want to refer to and change aspects about it, and you'll also want an action to happen when the user clicks it. So that's the basics of actions and outlets, but we're going to go through each of them and cover all of the different options that you can choose when you're creating each of those. So Chris will talk to you a little bit more about actions.
Sure. Okay. Is my screen being shared?
it is.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm going to do a quick demo here about actions. So if you can see my Xcode window, on the left I have a view where I put a bunch of stuff on it, and then I have actions on my right side in the view controller. So first I'm going to create an action, and so we can just see the default sort of options that we have here. So I'm going to control drag from the button called first into my code here. For connection, I'm going to choose action. And here you can see the options are object, name, type, event, and argument. So I'm just going to name it action, action 1. So here, as you can see, it creates a function called action1, which is what I named it, in the view controller, and it passes in one parameter called sender. So what is sender? Sender is a reference to the object that you're interacting with in your view. So in this case, that would be first. So to see this, I can just say print line first, and then I can run the project here. So I'm pressing first, and as you can see in my console down below, the word first is being printed. So let me quit out. So yeah, that's what happens by default. It happens. It just so happens that sometimes you want the sender parameter, like it matters a lot. Sometimes you want to know exactly what you're doing to the view. So that's called an event. And then sometimes you don't want to know anything really. So if I try to create another action, that would be the sort of arguments option here. So here you can choose between none, between sender, which is the default, and then between sender and event. So sender in this case is the view that you're interacting with, which is in this case a button. None means that no parameters will be passed in. So you would use this in the case when your what you're doing after, like what you want to do after you press the button doesn't depend on that button. Oh, we have a question.
The question is from Chuck Bradley, who asks, if you're writing an IB action, for example, how do you know when self must be used to reference the local context?
So this question depends upon if you're using Swift or Objective-C. In Swift, pretty much you don't have to use self unless it's ambiguous, like unless your variable name is ambiguous. So here, I guess I don't have anything that's ambiguous in this view controller right now, but if you had multiple things in your code called the same thing, then you would need to use self. So a typical situation when that would happen in your first project is one of the things you're supposed to do is create an object to hold an audio file. And in that audio file, you have an initializer. So that initializer will take an argument called like file path, the location on your phone, and then like the name of the file. So you'd have a property in that class called file path, but then you'd also have a property, a parameter in your initializer called file path. So in that case, you do something like self file path equals file path. But pretty much you only need to use self if it's ambiguous what you mean. Another question.
From Herman, who asks, what's the difference between setting the sender as any object versus UI button?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. It's something we were going to go over.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, any object is the type of the object that you're interacting with. UI button is another type. In Swift, this sort of restricts the methods you're allowed to, like the properties you're allowed to access or the methods you're allowed to call on the object. So
I think it was passed down from Objective-C,
Mm-hmm.
where you needed to sort of specify because Objective-C wouldn't really know. But in Swift, you're usually just going to want to pick the type that of the view that you're using, or of the view that you're making this for.
Yeah, so buttons have properties such as like label. If you pass in any object, you won't necessarily have access to that, even if you want to modify it. So we always suggest using the most specific type that you can. So always configuring action and then setting the type to UI button.
Right. We have another question.
From Fred Waltman, who asks, so can I have one action function respond to multiple UI elements?
You can. So we don't have that here, but so what you would do in your code, do I have my screen up?
Not yet, but now you do.
Sure. So we have this action here. So I have first connected to my action. As you can see, you can connect a button to multiple actions. As you can, so I've connected it to 3 actions here. You can also connect multiple buttons to the same action by control dragging. And if you control drag and highlight the function you want to connect it to, it'll draw a big blue box around it, and then you just let go, and then it connects. So I'm right-clicking on second here, and as you can see, I've connected my action to it as well. So for second and first. So you can do multiple actions per view, and then multiple views per action as well.
Do you have any other questions?
Not that are immediately pertinent.
Cool. Right.
Okay.
So I think, where was I? So I think I'm done with the first example where I just wanted to show you what the default is, and then now we can get into my second example, which is showing you the different options you have for the event parameter. So here, arguments, so the default is sender, but you can choose sender and event or none. So for event, there are many sorts of things you can choose. Essentially, these are different actions the user will take to sort of activate the action. So
you can, sorry to interrupt. You can think that this might be useful in like a game that you might play. So just say you have a character view, and if you tap on her, she jumps, and if you drag her, she dodges. So that's something that you might want to send the event and the sender.
Yeah, so in this demo, I have one button where you touch up inside and it'll print touch, and then if you touch up outside, it'll print touch outside to the console. So if I run this quickly, and it comes up. So in second, I'm clicking and I'm just letting go without moving the mouse, and it'll print touch. And then if I click and then move outside of it and then let go, then it'll print touch outside. So because you can connect multiple actions to one button, typically if you want different things to happen based on how you interact with that button, you'll just wire multiple actions to it, like I did here below. So I have a function for the touch outside event and then another function for the touch inside event. New question.
More a suggestion, can you blow up the font on your code, please?
Sure, let me try.
I think try putting Command plus, maybe that will do it.
Font, nope. Command plus?
Yeah, try Command plus. No, it doesn't work.
Not quite.
Let's Google this.
I don't know why I can't do it. It's so sad.
So if you go to
I think you
Xcode
click on
Preferences,
Next.
if you go to Preferences,
Yeah.
Fonts and Colors, then select any font list.
Oh, I have to select the font actually. So if I select all of them, and then
you can,
there,
you command all and then you select the font size.
Cool.
Thank you, Google.
Yep. Okay. So we have bigger font and slightly different colors. Let me get this out of the way for a sec, and then increase this. Get rid of this as well. Okay. Cool. So I think this is better. Hopefully. Hopefully you can see this. Yeah. So here I have a function for touch up outside, and then a function here for touch up inside. So two functions, two actions wired to the same view. So the sender here is any object. So we said earlier that we would really like you to use UI button instead. It doesn't matter here because in this function we're not actually doing anything with the sender. So ideally we would have no argument, but I was just a little lazy. So the default.
We have another question.
Select the font to be presentation, it will work.
Oh.
That's a suggestion
Thank
from
you.
Abdullah.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
We'll know for next time.
Yes. Okay, so the third example I have for you here shows is here to demonstrate what you can do if you have access to the event as well. So you would think that or at least I thought when I was looking this up, that event would allow you to sort of divide up your logic between the sort of different things you can do. That's a little bit difficult. What people usually use event for is for more specific information about what the user is doing. So in this example, I am just printing out the location in the entire phone where I'm interacting with. So if I demo this, let's see. So I'm clicking, and then nothing's happening. Okay, so yeah, so I'm clicking, I'm activating it inside the button, and as you can see, it's printing out the coordinates of where I'm actually touching. So
so that's probably what it's.
Yeah, so as I'm
sends.
clicking in different places around the button, it's printing out different stuff. So it's just very, very specific information about what you're actually interacting with. And if I can walk you through the code really quickly, basically the first line is getting all the touches. So if I bring up the documentation, UI event. So getting the touches for an event is the all touches function, which returns an optional NS set. So I'm not sure if it's going to be there or not, so I have to put the question mark there, which I think we'll talk about later, perhaps next week.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about optionals next week.
And then in an NS set to interact with it, you have to use the property all objects. So all objects is an array that contains all of its members. It's not optional, so I don't have to do anything there, but I do have to cast it to an array of UI touch objects. So because I want to access a property of UI touch, by default, all objects returns an array of any object, which doesn't have any of the UI touch properties that I want to access. So I have to tell Swift that what I'm really doing is getting an array of UI touches, which is this sort of part of it, the as question mark, and then the array of UI touches. So now that I have an array of that, I'm going to go through the array in a for loop. So for touch and touches, and then I'm just going to print out the location in view. So if I bring up the UI touch documentation, getting the location of touches, location in view, and it gives me a CG point, which is pretty much just coordinates, as you can see down here. Inside a view, and so self view, the view controller always has a pointer to the view that it's associated with, and it's just called self view. So yeah, the XY coordinates inside the view that you're looking at.
Awesome. Oh, we have a question.
New question.
We actually have questions coming in thick and fast. I just wanted to say, if we don't get to all of them, what do we suggest that students do?
We will post answers to all of the questions.
We will
in
answer
the forum.
questions. Yep.
Yeah.
So don't worry, you can keep asking them, and we will get to all of them. Maybe
Yes.
just not on camera. So that covers everything about actions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about outlets, and we've already almost covered everything that you need to know about.
Here, let me bring up this.
Yeah, let's do this. About outlets already. So we've covered name, which is just the name that you give it. We've covered object, which is just the object that you're currently creating this in. Type will be the type of view that you're making this outlet from. And so there's one, if you can see the screen, there's one other property that we haven't really, or option that we haven't really talked about yet, and that's strong and weak. And so strong and weak really has to do with memory allocation. It has to do with memory management. So when you're trying to save space, or you don't want to have sort of like floating elements that you're no longer using anymore. So you want to create pointers that will efficiently do this. So what Apple has done is created something called strong and weak. So ideally, what we wanted to do was have a pointer that that has power and a pointer that doesn't have power. So pointers in general will show you what you're looking at, and also and you can see them and you can use them. If you have an object that has no pointers pointing to it at all, then you don't really need it, and it makes sense that we'd want to reallocate that memory for something else. So then how do we not end up with a loop of pointers all pointing to each other and separated off from our main program that's just sort of taking up space? So that goes back to the strong and weak pointer. So we'll have one pointer that has decision-making power of whether or not this object can get reallocated, and we'll have weak pointers which can still view and use the object but have no real decision-making power. So I have an example that sort of helps to visualize this. So imagine if you have a piece of artwork that's out on the side of the street, and you can see it from your window, and you can also see if you were on the street holding that piece of artwork. But if you're on the street holding that piece of artwork, and a garbage truck comes by and tries to pick it up, it's not going to be able to take it because you're holding it. Now, if you're viewing it from your window, the garbage truck could come and pick it up and take it away. So it really doesn't matter how many people are viewing it from the window. If there's no one there to hold on to it on the side of the street, then that piece of artwork is going to get thrown out. So that's sort of, as you can imagine, that the strong pointers are analogous to the person holding on to it. So you really only need just one. As long as one person is holding on to it, then it's not going to get thrown out. And the weak pointers are the people watching from the window. So you can still enjoy it and use it, but you have no control over whether that space gets reallocated. And it doesn't matter if there's 10, 1, or 0 people watching from the window, or 10, 1, or 0 weak pointers. If there's not at least one strong pointer pointing to the object, then it's going to get thrown out.
So I think in this case, so the view as a whole, so like this entire window, iPhone window, for instance, has a strong pointer to everything beneath it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the watchers are sort of this view controller is a watcher. So the default here is weak, and it is weak because the iPhone screen has a strong pointer, so it's holding up this button,
right.
And the view controller is just looking at it.
Right.
Cool. All right, so one last thing really quickly. We're going to go over applet collections. So an applet collection is essentially it's an array of objects. Typically, you want to use this if you want to do the same thing to a lot of the same type of objects. So am I sharing my screen again?
Yes, you are.
Cool. So I have up here on your left 4 switches, so for the same thing, and I have them in an outlet collection called switches, and I can verify that by right-clicking on, I'm just going to right-click on one of them, but down here you can see referencing outlet collections, switches in my view controller. So, and as you can see in my view controller, switches is an array of UI switches. So here the demo is basically I have 2 buttons here called all and none. All will switch all of them to on, and then none will switch them all to off. Okay. So if I run this quickly, let me just switch them randomly, and I'm going to switch them all to on, which worked, and then we'll switch them all to none. So it's pretty much what happens. So the benefit of the outlet collection is that instead of hooking up an individual outlet for each of these switches, so like maybe I would do like switch 1, switch 2, switch 3, switch 4, and then I'd like in this all function I'd have to do like switch 1 dot set on true, switch 2 dot set on true. It's not very good code. Instead, I can iterate through the list of switches in a for loop and then set each one of them on with the same line of code, so I don't repeat anything. Yeah, that's pretty much when you would use one, and that's about it.
Awesome. So let's see some of these questions.
One question about the documentation. How do you pop it up, and what file gets displayed when you pop it up?
Yeah, so I actually have a separate program that pops it up for me. Typically, so in Xcode itself, the shortcut is Command-Shift-0, and that brings up this screen, which is, in my opinion, not as nice as the one that I brought up. So if you want to do the same thing on, say, anything inside your code, you would option click on it. So I'm holding down the option key right now, and I'm clicking on print line. That'll bring up a summary of the documentation that's in Xcode up as a pop-up.
And there's another thing I think you can do, which was there's a place that you can click, and it actually takes you to the documentation. So
I might have it. Like,
yeah, I think
weird.
it's a little bit differently.
So if you're interested in the program that I used, so it's called Dash. Basically, it allows you to download documentation from a bunch of different languages and use it offline. So if I go into my list of document sets really quickly, I program in Python, I use Vim, and then I also program in iOS occasionally, so I have all of them in this one program that I just bring up with one click, and it's easy to search. So I highly recommend it, but you can do almost the same thing using Xcode standard documentation, which you can bring up with Command-Shift-0 or go into Help, Documentation API Reference. There's a search box here. It's really nice. So NSSet. I go to NSSet, and yeah, I interact with it. You can interact with it almost the same way as I did earlier.
Mm-hmm.
with the program that I use. Cool.
Another question.
A comment, really. So far, I'm enjoying your going through the documentation. Please do more videos on understanding Apple's documentation.
We will try.
Let's do that. Good suggestion. Another question.
For all the effort Swift puts into making code more readable as English, if let is totally confusing. Can you explain it, please?
Sure. So, do you want to explain it? Or?
What about you, Gabrielle? Do you want to come join us?
Yeah.
So we actually are lucky we have an instructor here to join us for Rockstars, and I think she could probably answer this one best.
Let's see. Well, yeah, the best explanation of this is in Jason's Swift session on optionals. But if let basically allows you to check to see if an optional is nil or not, and if that value is there, assign it to the variable that comes right after the if let. And yes, it is. I was actually just thinking that, the other day, how that's one of the constructions that's very un-English-like.
For sure, yeah.
But should I elaborate more, or does that cover it?
Let us know if you have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Gabrielle, would you like to address the question about TDD versus BDD?
Oh yes. So we do not formally talk about TDD or BDD. Probably the most we sort of endorse BDD is in the capstone project in course 5, because we encourage you to interact with your users early and often, and really let your users, the behavior of your users drive the development of your project.
Awesome. Cool. Do we have any more questions?
We have tons.
Okay.
All right.
Can you demonstrate how to unwind to a previous screen from a button on a second screen in Swift? Is it as simple as just dragging and connecting from the button on the second screen to the view controller on the first screen?
Could you repeat the first part of that question?
Yeah.
How can one unwind from a previous screen from a button on a second screen?
So this is like if you're in a navigation controller, so it's replicating the standard back button pretty much. So I don't think you would actually connect an action at all. So what you would do is you would have a reference to the navigation controller in that view, and you would have an action with that button. In that action, you would reference the navigation controller and then pop the view controller from the stack.
Yep.
Is that enough detail?
Yep. That makes sense.
Question, are all instance variables public? In Objective-C, public properties were declared in the .h header file. How do public and private variables work in Swift?
Do you want me to take this? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are three access control words you can use in Swift. So I think there's public, there's protected, and there's private. So everything by default is protected, which means you can use it anywhere in your project or framework, I think. Public means it's exposed to anything, and then private means that it's only exposed in your file. So everything's sort of public. I think a lot of people recommend that you make everything private unless you don't need to, which I have not practiced at all in the demo that I just showed for you all. But yeah, it's definitely something to get used to in your own code.
This question is probably for Gabrielle, since it's from the UIKit class. In the color switcher, the view, the color block, was shown in the outline nested within another view item. How did that happen? What's the difference? Any significance?
How did that happen?
I didn't see what made that happen, and the one I added was at the same level as the other elements.
Okay. I'm not really sure. I think it could be done either way. Yeah, I don't think it's significant that it's nested.
Okay. to questions about the program.
All right.
Well, see if you can field these.
When are we going to cover concepts about Apple Watch?
So for those people without context, Apple announced a watch yesterday, I believe, at the event.
Yep. So that might be in the works. We don't have that as of yet, but I would definitely say you can potentially look forward to that in the future. Don't
The
make any
student
promises.
asks whether it's possible to do it as part of the final project.
Yes.
That'd be awesome, actually.
The course will guide us on how to place our apps in the App Store.
So that's something that right now we've released the entirety of the first course, the second course, and then parts of the third and fourth courses. The fifth course, which has not been released yet, will go over that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. A question that's currently unanswerable. How many students are in the March cohort?
So right now we have a couple hundred, and
More than a couple
Wait.
hundred,
Huh?
right? What?
and that number. Well, we have over 700 at this point, and that number is constantly changing. So we'll know in a couple weeks from now what the final numbers are, and you can expect some good smaller interactions within that group pretty soon.
Question for Krishna. You used a for loop in your outlet collection. Can you use a switch statement? I want to switch switches on and off based on conditions.
Oh, okay. So you mean inside the for loop? I don't think I really understand how you would use a switch statement on the entire array. If you want to use a switch statement inside the for loop, then that should be fine. The issue is, so in an outlet collection, the order of the switches is not guaranteed. So, I had 4 switches in a column here in my demo. It's not the case that the switch at the very top is going to be the first thing in your outlet collection. You have no idea what the order is in your array. So you probably wouldn't use a switch statement for that, but yeah, you could.
A question from Jose. How do you add a view object into a collection? Should all of them be the same type?
Yeah, they should all be the same type. So by default, I can share my screen if you want. Cool. So I have my screen shared. So by default, if you start an outlet collection, the type will be of the thing. So I don't think there's anything stopping you from connecting. Oh, there actually is. Never mind. So yeah, you can only connect other UI buttons to the outlet collection. You would do it the same way that I connected a button to an already existing action before, by waiting to highlight this large blue box and then letting go.
Good question.
The last question that we have time for today is, who may I email regarding other course options? Perhaps several shorter courses I can take consecutively?
You can email.
You can email just to find out information about which courses you might want to take.
I think his question means if he wants to suggest that we build a series of short courses that can be taken consecutively.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Jessica, maybe?
Yeah. If you want to post on the forums,
that would work as well.
Yeah,
that also works, and then we can answer it.
A couple of things that I need to say about the questions that we didn't get to.
Mm-hmm.
One is, yes, we will get to all of them in the forums. I couldn't pick a couple up because they were very specific syntax-related questions, and it's hard to get the syntax from the question onto the screen so that everybody can see it.
Gotcha.
So we didn't get to those. I'm sorry about that. One suggestion that we have one on optionals. We are indeed doing that. When?
That will be next week, I believe.
Next week.
And
We will let you know more about that very soon.
Lots of love for Dash. They want instructions on how to install Dash. So.
Gotcha.
Nice.
We'll provide.
Definitely don't hesitate to ask any questions on the forums. We're always there, and we read through them, and we'll answer every single one. So, well, that is all the time we have. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Thanks, Gabrielle, and thanks, Krishna.
Thanks, guys.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
No love for me?
Oh, of course, Reggie. Thank you.